To play.
This is Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
Respect, people.
Yay! Yay for Missy, and thanks for that intro. Throwback classic Missy Elliott. You know, I had a chance to watch her perform live at the 2018 Essence Fest. It was so dynamic, but she came out to Cardi B's song, which was even better because I was like,
wrote it.
So yeah.
That I don't know about, but the fact that she is like respecting younger rappers and younger rappers respect her, like I don't know, Missy's iconic.
She's iconic.
Speaking of icons in the making, welcome to Let Your Voice Be Heard, where we are icons in the making. I don't know. Hey, that's subjective. Welcome, guys. Happy Sunday. Of course, this is the show where we talk politics, social issues, and pop culture from a young perspective, even though that's subjective too. Like I don't know.
Subjective.
I am young. Okay, it's Jackie who's going to her death.
Right. It was Jackie who texted us.
I texted you to invite you to my funeral, aka my 30th birthday party in a couple weeks.
We are all in our wash years now.
Well, I still have a few weeks. I'm not there yet, but
we all know the whites age faster. Sorry,
that's not
true.
Wrong. That's not wrong.
We got to say good morning to Willow. Morning, Willow.
Yay,
yes,
hi,
good morning
Willow.
to everyone who's watching.
Willow, who will be 31 week after me, so
Whoa.
she's next.
Oh, you calling Willow out right now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Heather had to
putting
mess
you
up
on
and be
blast,
born in
Willow.
April.
Heather's still a young one. So
You said it next, like it's like the Bird Box saga. Like I'm going down, then you're going down. Like that's
we're
funny.
all going down with
We're all going
arthritis and
down.
whatever else. Yeah.
But thank you guys so much for tuning in to Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM. My name is Selena Hill. On Instagram, you can follow me at Miss Selena Hill. And apparently my Instagram stories are so popping that even Stanley started watching. Then he called me and was like, I watched your Instagram story. It was so lit.
They're
Did
always
you not?
good.
Wait,
Did
was
you
this
not?
the one at the birthday party at the bowling? Because I watched that one.
Yeah, it was that
You
one.
see why I don't say nice things to Selena?
You know, honestly, though, my favorite Instagram story, like over the past 2 weeks, was one of Jackie's, and it was Ben eating a zebra cake. Because I was like,
my God.
how has this man never had a zebra cake in
we
his
were
life?
out at a bar, and Willow, who is listening, will appreciate this. We were out at a bar with friends, and somebody said something about craving zebra cakes, and Ben was like, "What's that?" And we were all like, "Excuse me," and he was like, "I've never even heard of zebra cakes."
He's from California. It's a horrible place.
That's why.
He had never. No, I've known plenty of people all over the world that know what a zebra cake is. So we left the bar and immediately walked
you
into
travel all over the world and ask them if they know about
I'm
zebra
being-
cakes?
Okay, yes, Selena. That's the first thing I ask people when I travel all over the world. So we went immediately to a bodega, and they had those huge ones for 99 cents, and we bought 4 of them, and it was a great time.
I'm glad you had a great experience.
Well, can we take a step back real quick?
Sure.
No one knows who we are.
No, I
Who are
introduced
we?
myself. Speak for yourself, Stanley.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
sorry,
yeah. Everybody
Queen.
knows who Selena is, but nobody knows who anybody else is.
That is
so
fair.
why
that
don't
is
you
fair.
tell us who you are?
Well, hello, beloveds. My name is Stanley Fritz. You can find me on Twitter at Stan Fritz.
Sexy
you can
chocolate?
find no
Hashtag?
more like average looking chocolate.
No, you're very sexy, Stanley.
Aw, that
Thank
was
you,
nice,
Alyssa.
Alyssa.
This is coming from a gay woman, so you know.
It doesn't really count.
So,
No, it counts.
Not
it counts
really.
more because, you know, I ain't trying to hit it with him.
yeah, because like she looks at guys and she's like, nope. So, but like for me, she's like,
Exactly.
All right. So you can find me on
Right.
Twitter at Stan Fritz, on Instagram at Stan Fritz. You can find me on Snapchat. I've been on Snapchat. I snapped one thing yesterday at Dark Skin Swindle, a first edition copy of the Black Panthers book that the lady at the bookstore,
Yeah.
Sisters Uptown Bookstore, would not sell to me. because
You had
she's
a
hater.
good Instagram story yesterday of your bookstore experience.
Did
and
you
like
see my
Love
bodega
Fest.
secret curtain?
No.
Oh, I'll show you later.
Okay. Hi.
Good morning.
I'm Jackie.
You go first. I'll go last.
Okay. Last and best for last. I'm Jackie Cohen. You can follow me on Twitter, on Instagram at Jackie Cohen, JaquiCohen. Hi. I'm tired.
You need a zebra cake.
I need a zebra cake. I
If,
need
if
sugar
there's
to
a
give
problem
you
with the
this
subway, contact
No,
Jackie.
please.
Don't
I
contact
mean,
Jackie.
You probably already do.
I miss
Stanley
doing
certainly. you miss it as if you haven't been doing it.
I haven't done it in like a good
Week.
Well, I used to do it on a train. Me and Jackie would be on a train together, and when I was getting off, I'd be like, guys, any problems you have with the MTA, talk to her.
You've never done that, but I'm nervous about. You've never done that, but I'm worried that you're going to. And that's why I don't take the train with you.
I tweet at the MTA, like, I'll be like, oh, wait, I should tell you who I am first. So I'm Alyssa Fuchs. I am your political and legal correspondent. So talk legal to me. And
professional MTA tweeter.
Professional MTA tweeter. In fact, I was in the New York Daily News last week for being a professional MTA tweeter. So check out that New York Daily News article.
Can you send it out? Or
You're the only one who's like out the loop
I didn't
over
see
here.
It.
All right,
maybe we'll share it on the page. But Alyssa, I am professionally talking about transit, and Alyssa was in the Daily News talking about transit Twitter.
Nice.
So yeah, I you can find me on Facebook when I'm not in the Daily News on Facebook at facebook.com/Alyssa Fuchs. That's ILYSSAFUCHS. Or you can leave a comment on the Politically Preposterous fan page, or you can find me on Twitter at Alyssa Fuchs or on Instagram Alyssa.Fuchs. I don't know. I'm like an amateur transit tweeter. You know what it is? Transit issues have a lot to do with criminal justice issues, and there's a lot of interaction there. But mostly my anxiety just gets really high when the MTA tells me that we have quote unquote good service and then tweets at me telling me that there's a problem with the Q train. So like, either maybe update your website and say that we don't actually have good service, because like this is terrible service, as in the opposite of good service.
Well, we hear you.
Yeah, so guys, we actually have a great show lined up. We're going to be talking about the Shutdown Showdown 2019. The government is shut all the way down, and we're going to talk about the very real impact that is having in your lives and in our communities. We're also going to talk about other things like the fact that R. Kelly is under investigation in Georgia. There's been some other allegations and revelations coming out about people who were in the documentary and other women. So we're going to talk about Surviving R. Kelly. The saga is continuing.
Yeah.
And I know Jackie and Stanley in particular have some thoughts on that we will share.
Yeah, panic attacks and not reading.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, guys. So, of course, if you want to let your voice be heard, feel free to give us a call at
212-650-6903.
Again, that's 212.
Oh, you want me to go? All right, 650
212
690
Or you can tweet us at
_radio.
Or you
69.
can leave us a comment on our Facebook Live. That's so annoying. Stanley in particular. Or you can leave us a comment on Facebook Live. Shout out to everyone who is tuned in via Facebook Live.
Yeah, shout out to Antoinette. Shout out to Willow, to Darren. Thank you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate
all
Everybody's three.
Watching.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, and
we have 11 people watching right now, so shout out to all 11 of you.
Yes, leave those comments, engage with us, talk to us. We want to know your thoughts on the shutdown, how it's impacting you, and of course the immigration crisis, which is not if you say crisis, it's a humanitarian crisis, and we'll talk about that in a few more minutes. Right now, we have to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard.
Alyssa Fuchs. Oh, I'm black, huh? You know this? No.
So Selena just said that you wouldn't end up in jail without evidence, and my response was, really? He's a black man.
No, we're talking about the circumstances that we were talking about on break.
One time I gave Jackie a hug and I got arrested. You know how much time you get for talking to white women?
I can't.
Come on. We are back on Let Your Voice Be Heard on 90.3 FM WHCR, the voice of Harlem. If you're wondering who this is, it's Stanley Fritz. I'm here with Alyssa Fuchs, Selena Hill, and of course Jackie Mother-Lovin' Cohen. In the studio, we also have our youth intern, Dejanay, who came to play, but not when you're talking about Jay-Z. And we also have the Immaculate O in the studio for the first time. So if you're on Facebook Live, say hello to the Immaculate, lit, cool interns. But Dejanay's a youth, so she doesn't know stuff.
All right. Thank you for that introduction. So we're starting things off talking about the news stories that made us really upset over the week and maybe something that was exciting. So feel free to let us know what news you were talking about. I know Alyssa wanted to talk about some breaking news that happened within the last 24 hours.
I mean, yeah, it's like breaking in the sense that the New York Times broke it last night. Although I feel like it's also news that we all knew, which is apparently the FBI started investigating Donald Trump for potentially being a Russian agent way before he even got elected president. Like while the campaign was still going on, and even at the beginning of his presidency, before the Mueller investigation was open, there were people in the FBI who were like, "Wait, what? Like maybe he's working for Russia." And so obviously this is another one of those articles from the New York Times that comes from a quote unquote unnamed source who doesn't want to go on the record with their name because presumably they're still working for the FBI and they're giving information that really we're not supposed to know. But like, it's kind of like confirming something obviously there was no conclusion whether he was or wasn't. And whatever information they got, they passed on to Mueller. That report's going to be coming out soon, presumably. But that's like nuts. I mean, it's like confirmation of things that we already thought were probably true.
Yeah, I mean, people have been acting surprised, and I guess you got to act surprised because it's finally been confirmed. But I thought that's what we all thought from the beginning.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, 3 words. Lock him up.
Can we do that as a chant?
No.
Okay.
So I want to switch the gears.
We
up
want
a
to be
little
that
bit.
petty.
I mean, do we want to talk about this some more? Because I mean, it is a big thing technically. I don't. Anyway, what I do want to talk about though. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also known as a Puerto Rican princess of the Bronx. She's in Congress now. She's 25 years old. She's not washed like Jackie, and she's shaking things up. So much so that Democratic congressmen are nervous and trying to rein her in the background. They're saying that she's talking about taxing the rich and helping poor people, and they don't like that stuff. But they're afraid to talk to her face because she might make fun of them on Twitter. That's a political story.
Yeah, there was a really interesting article in Politico this week where a lot of members of Congress, including a lot of representatives from New York City, went on record to say, well, we think that she's going about things all wrong. She should be focusing on making friends here and not on, policy changes. Basically, it's like this clash between the old school and the new school. Yeah. And I think that they are, what they were saying is not surprising. Again, right? What they're saying is, she should be focused on sort of being more transactional and willing to work and collaborate with other members of Congress. But I was shocked to see them go on record and be so blatant about it when they know that she primaried somebody who was from that old school, right?
Yeah, definitely. To me, that's such a bad move. Alexandria is the darling of the progressive left. Like, she speaks to millennials, she speaks to people of color, and she's representing so well. And I think that if Democrats want to pit themselves against her and say things, bad things about her on record, it's just making them look further disconnected. The reason why Alexandria won that primary and is elected is because she's not afraid to go against the grain. She's not afraid to speak up and represent us, and she doesn't care who it ticks off. Like, she went to Nancy Pelosi's office while there was a massive protest going on, and she joined them. Mm-hmm. And she's like, you know what? I get you. I feel you. And honestly, I feel like she's one of us.
Right. No, look.
Oh, sorry.
I hear you on all this. I agree with all this. There's 2 things I want to say about it. One, there was something in that article that was pointed out that I did agree with. Most of the article I didn't agree with for the reasons you guys already mentioned, so I won't repeat them. But the one thing that struck me about the article is they said with certain people, certain Democrats, they are at risk in their district. They live in a moderate district. They live in a more centrist district. And that for some people, she needs to be careful about what she says because she could end up in a situation where she could say something that we may very well agree with, and she could cause a Democrat in a swing district to lose their seat, which could mean less Democrats in Congress. So that was the one part of that thing that I thought, maybe that in certain situations, not all situations, but in some very small situations, she should maybe take a step back. That is a very small, like I said, I want to make clear, I'm not saying that should as the bigger picture. Yeah. I think that maybe in 1 or 2 situations, that is true. The second thing I just wanted to point out is about the tax cuts, but I can wait on that.
Yeah, thanks. So, I just want to point out one thing. I would take that more seriously if one of the people not speaking publicly was Yvette Clarke, a Brooklyn congresswoman who almost lost her district because she's crappy on the issues.
Right.
And, why are you even criticizing Alessandra? Because you know what? You got young people of color who are ready to make you unemployed. Why don't you make sure you're passing legislation and speaking up for the issues that people in Brooklyn care about?
No, I agree with that. It's the idea that there's 500 something congressional districts. There's going to be a few districts here and there and in between where a moderate Democrat, even though we may not agree with them, may be a better fit. I'm not saying that's always the case. Yeah. I actually think progressives are doing a better job of winning, and in some cases winning over people that you would think would more likely vote for a moderate Democrat. But I'm saying that we just can't look at everything with a blanket, right? We have to be open-minded about the fact that some things work somewhere and some things don't work.
But
somewhere.
I don't think that this status quo sort of maneuvering of the Democratic Party as of late, as of the past few years, is working anywhere. And I think that it is important to have a check on power, right? And I think what was so remarkable about her campaign was, a lot of people, I remember hearing during the election, oh, but Joe Crowley, he's from New York and he's going to go up against Trump and he's like a good Democrat, quote unquote. And
I would disagree with that. But.
Sure. But, a lot of people felt that way. And I think that what was so remarkable about Ocasio-Cortez's campaign was that she proved it doesn't matter if you are, on paper on the right side of things. What you need to do is be connected to your base, connected to your constituency, represent the party, and try something new. And she's re-energized the left in a way that no other person has, I think, aside from Bernie Sanders, right? I know, like, she obviously can't run for president, right? Because she's too young to. But she has done something, I think, really remarkable in that she's engaged young people, she's engaged the progressive left in ways that no other candidate has in recent years besides Bernie Sanders.
And something that's happening to Ocasio that happened to Obama is because she's a woman, but she's also a woman of color, all of a sudden now people are trying to prove her as a fraud.
Yeah.
She wasn't really that smart. She didn't deserve to go to this college. She's not really from like a rough neighborhood.
Oh, she grew up about 10 minutes. I mean, she's from the Bronx, right? And she's lived in the Bronx for years, but where she gets called out a lot for growing up in Yorktown Heights, New York, which is about 10 minutes from where I grew up. And we would have been, if I lived one town over, we would have been in the same class growing up. And that's a town, what is, I think, amazing and speaks to her as well, is similarly to my experience, we both grew up in some of the most conservative towns in Westchester County. So the fact that she was sort of confronted with that her whole life, I think, helped probably prime her for the position she's in now, too.
Absolutely. And I know we do have to move on because there are a lot of other news stories. But speaking of women of color who, when they speak up, get criticized, all of us are still talking about surviving R. Kelly. It was hard enough for me to take one episode, so I had to do a lot of reading up on it because, just the graphics. Well, I mean, you get so many visuals, just the way that these victims or survivors described how they were harassed, assaulted, and abused by R. Kelly for years. And I want to say that ever since this came out, we know that he is now under investigation in Georgia, so that may or may not lead to some jail time. But on top of that, Touré, who has been on Let Your Voice Be Heard before, he is a famed black journalist. He actually did one of the most famous interviews with R. Kelly when he asked him in 2008, do you like teenage girls?
Define teenagers.
And right.
No, he said, do you like young girls?
No, he said teenage. He said, do you like teenage girls? And R. Kelly infamously responded by saying, and I quote, when you say teenage, how old
do you mean?
Right. How old are we talking? So now it turns out that a woman has claimed that when she was working with him as a makeup artist, he repeatedly sexually harassed her verbally. So, I mean, he has come out to Essence through a rep saying that he described it as edgy and crass banter. And at the time, he didn't think it was offensive. And he's sorry for the language. But, I guess I'll throw it to you, Stanley, because, what do you feel about Touré, who is making media rounds criticizing R. Kelly? And now it turns out that he is being accused of sexually harassing a woman as well.
So let me just say that can be almost any guy. Like, almost every guy has said or done something wild trash to a woman. And because, it's always been considered, standard operating procedure, he doesn't even know it. Or he hasn't even thought about it. Touré is lying. I saw, the DM messages between him and the makeup artist got leaked. She warned him several times. And then he still came in her inbox and was like, hey, sweetie. And she hit him with the, what's up, Harvey? And then that's when he was like, oh, well, I'm sorry. He knew what was going on. And I think what happened to Ray is a good example of why more men need to do some soul searching, myself especially, to think about some of the ways you have acted and talked to women and really come to to terms with that and start to deal with it, because you're going to see a lot more of that. If people start talking about some of the things I said in college to women on campus, and are you crazy? Listen, it wasn't pretty. It was not. So that's just the fact.
Look, just to loop back around to the beginning, I think that the more, and as somebody who, in full disclosure, has not seen the R. Kelly documentary, I think it's more shocking, not just the documentary itself, but the amount of people that are still defending R. Kelly. I mean, literally, I had a conversation with somebody the other day who told me, oh, well, these girls wanted it, and the only reason they're coming out now is because they're trying to get some money. So, like at this point, I feel like when we now are also talking about him being investigated criminally, from a legal perspective, and of course, those are allegations. And there's one thing, there's the press and whatever. And obviously, I believe the women. And then there's the other thing, which is if he has criminal charges brought against him, he is entitled to the presumption of innocence in the court of law, not necessarily in the court of public opinion. But the amount of people who really think that women would just come out and put themselves out there like this so that they could get money. And, some of them might, but that's like an aside.
Yeah.
It's like apples and oranges is like insane to me.
And something that's really been shocking to me too, and I've been watching the series. I still have one episode to go, and it's been really brutal to listen to these stories. Right, it's been awful. But what's so surprising is that many of the stories that we're hearing about through this documentary series are not new. Right, they're things that we've known. Things that, certainly the Aaliyah thing is things that we knew. Many of these stories the public has known about, right? We did a whole show about it about a year ago on Let Your Voice Be Heard. But I think that having it all laid out at once, right, and seeing the whole depth of the problem, it doesn't excuse the fact that there's been no action at any of these incidents, right? For years, this has been a person who's been an abuser, who has been manipulative, who has taken advantage and statutorily raped young girls.
Allegedly.
And no one has done anything. And I think that now we're at a point where it's all laid out at once and there's no excuse anymore.
Yeah, it definitely isn't. And, I know we're wrapping this up, but, speaking of people who you said were defending him. So R. Kelly celebrated his birthday a few days ago. He went to the club. He started busting out a song, Bump and Grind, and women were like screaming. And there was one report where which said allegedly that a woman or some women were there screaming, take me hostage. Which is beyond. But you know what? It does. That speaks to the cycle of abuse.
I wasn't there, but that just reminds me of that Chris Rock set where he's like, women. Yeah, where Chris Rock talks about how like a girl girls are like, oh, that's too dirty, and then they'll be in the club, be like, put it in my eye.
Okay, so speaking of good things that happened this week, before we go to break, we have to mention that Cyntoia Brown has been granted clemency. We know that she was originally sentenced to life as a human trafficking victim. She killed somebody who, paid her for sex. It was, as she says, in self-defense. She was a teenager at the time. This was a grown man. She was a victim and now a survivor, and now she has been freed. And we know that a number of celebrities like Rihanna and Kim Kardashian, they helped to amplify her case. And Kim Kardashian actually enlisted a top-notch legal team in 2017 to pay for lawyers to help Brown's case, and now she's being free. Thoughts quickly?
Yeah, just one correction. She will be freed. She's
will
not
be freed
yet.
August
in
2019.
August is when she's getting out. My only thought is, look, this is one person, and that is a great thing, and I'm so glad that she's getting out, but there are so many more people in prison that are there either wrongfully, that were convicted wrongfully, or that are in situations like hers where they were convicted when they actually did commit a crime, but maybe they shouldn't have been because of self-defense. And of course, we see most of the time white men usually can use a self-defense, but black women usually will still be found guilty, even in situations where they bring up the fact that they were acting in self-defense. So, it's great that she's being freed, but the work continues. So please, if you guys are engaged in this, just realize that the bigger picture is big and we need to keep working.
Yeah, I think that it's amazing, this news, and it's hopeful, happy news that, in such a dark time. But I think that it shouldn't necessarily, to Alyssa's point exactly, there are so many more people in similar situations that don't have the resources that, Kim Kardashian has to provide to help them get out of their situation. So it speaks, it's a great thing that this is happening, but we still need to be aware of the many, many people that don't have this kind of support and resources behind them to get out of where they are.
So, guys, we do have to go on a quick break, but I just want to leave you with one more thought, that the fastest growing population in prisons is actually women, and most of them because they have drug addiction, or they are escaping or reacting to an abusive relationship. And Toya Brown was somebody who had been kidnapped as a child and was being used as a sex slave. So, besides just like trying to get more people out of jails and prisons, we got to make sure we're fighting for women, because what's happening to women, particularly black and brown women in this country, is flat out disgusting.
Absolutely. On that note, we do have to take a quick break. But when we come back, we're going to be talking about the Shutdown Showdown that's happening and unfolding right before our eyes. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard.
I ain't gonna stop. Woo, woo. What? You got like a dark Cosby sweater? Damn, I can't even say Cosby sweater anymore.
You can say Cosby sweater.
I mean, Quaaludes, Cosby. You can't do that.
All right, we are back. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem, where Stanley makes inappropriate jokes about women's sweaters and throws Bill Cosby's name in there. Okay. Guys, we are all in the government shutdown, and we're going to have this conversation, starting with the fact that, today marks the 23rd day of the partial federal government shutdown, and this makes it the longest in history with no end in sight. Now, many federal institutions are closed while hundreds of thousands of workers are furloughed, causing many of them to worry about, the things we take for granted in life, like buying groceries, paying rents and mortgages, and providing for families. Meanwhile, the government shutdown is causing the rest of us to question and ponder the big questions like, are we going to get our tax returns on time? And will we be delayed or held up at the airport now that TSA workers are not getting paid?
Yes.
So the shutdown is being fueled over President Trump's refusal to pass a bipartisan government funding bill because it does not include money for his ego-driven border wall. Last week, 18 days into the shutdown, the president delivered a reprehensible primetime speech where he pitted Americans of color against one another and grounded his case for a wall in false premises. So one false premise was Trump pushed was, and I quote, "Our southern border is a pipeline for vast quantities of illegal drugs, including meth, heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl."
False.
In actuality, the majority of drugs smuggled through the southern border come through official ports of entry. For example, according to a Drug Enforcement Administration report, most heroin smuggled into the country comes in via vehicles driven through legal ports of entry, followed by tractor trailers, where the heroin is commingled with legal goods. Body carriers, on the other hand, they typically carry very small amounts of heroin, and they tape it to their bodies, they put it in their shoes or their backpacks, right? So another lie that Trump pushed is that Americans should be afraid that undocumented immigrants are going to come and murder our families.
False.
In reality, undocumented workers commit violent crimes at a much lower rate than native-born Americans, while immigrants legally in the U.S. are even less likely to do so.
White men commit crimes at much higher rates.
Thank you for that, Alyssa. Another point in the speech, Trump falsely claimed that there has been a, and I quote, "sharp rise in unlawful migration."
False.
That's a lie. Overall, unauthorized migration to the U.S. has, in fact, fallen steadily since the Great Recession. Now, Trump also falsely claimed that the U.S. Mexico-Canada trade deal, which has not been approved by Congress, will indirectly pay for the wall.
False.
Because there is no provision in that deal stipulating that Mexico will provide money to the U.S. for a wall. So during this conversation, we're going to talk about the very real impact that the government is having on us now that it's shut down, and the manufactured immigration crisis, which is at the center of this issue. I want to open up the panel discussion by getting you all's reactions to the government shutdown and that awful speech that happened a few days ago. Jackie?
I just want to say before we get into it, if any of our listeners, either on Facebook Live or listening over air, want to work for the federal government and are being furloughed right now and want to call in and share their experiences or leave a comment, we will definitely read it on the air. We want to hear from you. How has this impacted you? What do you think the government should be doing? You can call us at 212-650-6903, 212-650-6903, or leave us a comment at BeHeard_radio on Twitter or on our Facebook Live. We definitely want to hear.
That's facebook.com/let your voice be heard.
Yeah.
You have some thoughts and reactions?
Yeah,
to this
is crazy, man. Like this, I have a lot of thoughts, and the speech I thought was I don't know. I thought maybe we would learn something new about what Trump was thinking or planning to do, but it was just, a call to his base. I mean, ultimately, we know why he's doing this and sticking so firm to it, right? Because if he gets this wall and he gets this through, he gets reelected.
Oh, I
right?
thought it was because he had a small penis.
Well, there's many reasons why, but I think that this is chief among them. This was his biggest campaign promise. His biggest campaign promise was to build this wall, right? And he needs to push it through, and he's willing to allow hundreds of thousands of federal workers to go without pay and still be expected to show up to work, just to build this really, sort of fascist monument as a symbol that doesn't actually do anything, right? This wall is not going to just keep people out, but it is a huge symbol to say we do not welcome other people here. We do not want you in this country. And I think he knows that he needs this wall to reinvigorate his base. And he's willing to go to these extreme lengths to allow hundreds of thousands of people to go without pay for weeks just so that he can get this through.
So a few initial thoughts. One, I did not watch his speech. Instead, I watched Stormy Daniels fold laundry in lingerie, which was great, by the way. At the end of it, she held up a bag of Flaming Hot Cheetos and ate them. Loved that. The biggest thing to me that's so scary about this is really what's going on at the airport, because although actually I shouldn't even say that, because I think the airport security is ineffectual. So scratch that, or as the lawyers would say, strike that. No, the truth is the really most frustrating thing about this is Donald Trump saying he's going to potentially declare an emergency to build this wall when there's really no emergency other than a humanitarian crisis that he created. And yet we literally have a gun emergency every other day. We have a climate change emergency that is not going away. And, not for nothing, Republicans, be careful what you wish for, because if you do this way, then the next time a Democrat's president, then maybe they're going to declare an emergency to just act when it comes to gun violence, or some of these other issues.
Would be appropriate.
Which would even be appropriate.
That is totally, because it is an emergency.
So, if we want to talk about government overreach, obviously be careful what you wish for. But before we go to Stanley, we're getting two quick comments that we want to read. One, Ken Roy Charrington says, I'm hoping that if more Republicans put force with the Democrats, Trump will back down before March. Please don't hurt my snap. We're going to talk about that, how it's really affecting people. And Ulysses Simone says, white men make sure they take out at least 15 plus people when they murder. So true. And so in line with my comments about, how gun violence is the real emergency.
Yeah, so just for those of you who are listening, I do want to give one piece of information. If you rely on public assistance, it is good at least until February. They have enough funding to last until February. But if this shutdown goes any longer, we're going to be in trouble, and a lot of people are going to be hurt. This entire thing, we should be clear, like Ashley has said, is based on just racism. He wants $5 billion for the wall. If we could take $5 billion right now and invest it into the country, every single person can get student loan forgiveness, and we could still pay for free college for everyone. Or we could pay for health insurance for every single person in this country. But the way that things are set up right now, unfortunately, we can't go in that direction. Folks should know that, right now, Friday, people got their paychecks and it said $0.00 on them. And most of those people are not going to get back pay, because a lot of people in the federal government, like a lot of us now, they're not even actual workers. They're paid contractors, which means they can pay you a base salary, but they don't have to provide you any kind of benefits. So this is a really bad situation. Janitors, home care workers, a lot of folks are not going to get paid at all. And the government is pretty much saying, well, so what?
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump himself said, something along the lines of, it's inconvenience, but he said he thinks that the workers who are not being paid don't mind sacrificing their hard-earned money so that he can try to build a wall. And I just want to say that another reason why this wall is so detrimental is because a mass majority of people who are coming to this country are seeking asylum. And a wall would not stop that, because that's a legal process. So they can legally come here to the border and ask for asylum. So the wall at this point, it's just purely symbolic. I want to talk about the shutdown's impact on food stamps, tax returns, and other aspects of how this is affecting society. I know that Stanley touched on the food stamps, and one of our listeners also asked about how, food stamps will be affected. And Stanley was right. Food stamps are funded through February. But what happens after that? And, also, what about, WIC, W-I-C, which is for women who have children who need government assistance. That's funded through February. But, February is the shortest month of the year. What happened?
Don't you know Republicans are so pro-life? They want you to have that baby. But then once it comes out, they're like, oh, WIC, Oh, don't care. I mean, look, the end of the day, this destabilizes our country. Not having the government funded, not paying federal workers, it destabilizes the country because of the fact that, like, for example, at the airport. Now, the issue of whether or not I think TSA security is effective is like another show. That's another episode of Let Your Voice Be Heard. But the truth is, if you have federal workers that literally work at the airports and their job is supposed to be to keep terrorists from getting on the plane, and they're not showing up to work because they're not getting paid, that makes us less safe. If you have women that are struggling to survive, and to put food on the table for their kids and may think about now going out and committing a crime so that they can put food on the table, that makes us less safe. If you have federal prison workers that are not being paid and also federal inmates that are not getting the services that they are supposed to be getting, that makes us less safe. And there's so many other examples I could give on that. So while we're talking about a border wall, which every single expert says does not make us more safe and will not have the effect that Trump thinks it's going to have, and yet he's holding up government funding because of this wall, which, again, as we've mentioned, is largely symbolic, and really every expert has looked at this, says will not have an effect. We are in turn actually making the country less safe in doing that. And I should say Donald Trump is making the country less safe because after all, this is his shutdown. He said, and I quote, "I own the shutdown. If you guys don't give me what I want, I will shut this thing down."
Right. And I have to wonder, has he and has Trump's people looked at who is the most affected by the shutdown and by not receiving paychecks and benefits? And have they weighed it and said, you know what, it's worth screwing over these people because they're not going to vote for us anyway? And if it reinvigorates our base, then great. I think about TSA workers in particular. Airports are usually in urban centers, right? They're in cities, and oftentimes TSA employees are not super well paid to begin with, and many TSA workers are people of color. And I think to Trump, he's probably like, well, I don't need them anyway. They weren't going to vote for me, so let them go without pay.
Yeah, but it deserves to be mentioned that farmers are not able to get their loans approved right now. And so there's a major crisis going on with farms and people who actually voted for Trump. And there's all these farmers that are like, oh my God, what am I going to do? That the FDA isn't working. All these other agencies are working. There was numerous stories in the New York Times this week about how blue collar workers and Trump supporters and farmers and craft brewers and all these people that supported Trump are literally, don't know what's going to happen with their farm. And they don't know how they're going to be able to operate and what crops they're going to plant for next year and whether or not they're going to be able to get the loans from the agricultural department in order to do it. So yes, on one hand, it is like TSA workers and people that, are not Trump supporters. But on the other hand, there's a lot of Trump people being, impacted by this shutdown as well.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. There's a lot going on. Thank you, Alyssa, for giving all of those examples about how this shutdown is making our country effectively less safe. And even when we think about safe, we just had how many different E. coli outbreaks, and we couldn't eat lettuce for a while. Like, I think the FDA has a very important job of making sure our food is safe as well. But we do have to go on a quick break. We have a call on the line. We're going to get to your call as well, and we're going to talk about tax returns because I know that's another big issue. There's a lot of speculation and concerns going around. Will we actually get our taxes come tax season? So don't go anywhere. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard.
Something. Oh, you ready, Selena? My bad.
You did that purposefully.
A little bit.
We are back. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Again, I'm Selena Hill. I'm here with our full staff and crew, Stanley Fritz, Alyssa Fuchs, and Jackie Cohen. And we're talking about the government shutdown showdown of 2019. One thing that we definitely want to talk about is tax returns because there's a lot of questions around that. And I want to throw it to Stanley because apparently we had a call on the line who also wanted to let their voice be heard.
Yeah, just real quick to Alyssa as well. They're not getting back pay because they're subcontract workers, so they won't be getting that back. Only some people will get back pay. One of the callers, and she didn't want to go on air, but one thing she pointed out was that when they asked Trump why he was in no rush to reopen the government, and he said, well, it's only impacting Democrats. And what she said is that she feels Trump said that because he perceives Democrats as just black and Latino people and quote-unquote Mexicans and gay people, which we all know he doesn't care much about. So just as Republicans are trying to stop people of color from voting to change the levers of power, they're also literally trying to kill us off by using this government shutdown to hold people back from resources. And as we know, 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. One missed paycheck can be the difference between you having a home and sleeping on the streets.
Guys, if you want to call in, make sure you dial us up at 212-650-6903. So, from my understanding, and just so we all have full clarity, we will all be getting our taxes, but apparently the IRS is like 51% down in staffing or something like. Well, clarify.
Yeah. So the president, the White House has said that everyone will get their tax returns on time. They cannot guarantee that because pretty much they have demanded that everyone at the IRS come back to work. These folks are still not getting paid. So like at the TSA where folks aren't getting paid but required to come to work, folks are calling out sick en masse and they're not showing up to work and they're not doing their job, which in theory should happen. The same thing should happen with the IRS. So maybe you might get your tax return on time, but probably you won't. And the longer this government shutdown goes, the more likely a lot of those folks are going to have to look for other work because this has just been one paycheck. What happens the next payday now? You're a full month without any money coming in. So don't be so confident about your taxes coming in on time. I would expect them to be late.
Not for nothing. I think that's when this may all end because when Trump supporters don't get their tax returns and they start getting pissed off about that, and, farmers obviously are a small subset. But when all those Republicans and Trump supporters and racists, alleged racists or actual racists, don't get their tax returns, they're going to be just as mad, at which point they're going to start contacting their representatives and saying they want to open the government, which means this really isn't about a border wall. It's about racism.
Absolutely. And guys, and speaking of racism, we know that during Trump's infamous speech, he literally pitted people of color against each other, against undocumented immigrants when he said, and I quote, "All Americans are hurt by uncontrolled illegal migration. It strains public resources and drives down jobs and wages."
Are you okay?
That's my Trump impression, and I'm not done. Among those hardest hit are African Americans and Hispanic Americans. I've been practicing that, by the way.
Wow.
Could you tell?
Well done. Amazing.
Thank you. SNL, I'm available for bookings, okay? But I just want, so Trump literally said those words. It wasn't a laughing matter. Jackie, you want to chime in?
I mean, I think that he's done that repeatedly, right? He did that along the campaign trail. And the way that he's always talked to black people has been to say, oh, things are so bad for you. So what, you should vote for me because how much worse could it get? That's essentially what he said, right? So this kind of falls right into his playbook.
So this is 1,000% false. Quote unquote illegal immigration is not impacting the jobs of black and Latino people at all. Actually, like Selena said at the beginning of the show, immigration from Mexico and the southern border into America has decreased significantly since 2008. The thing that is actually hurting employment for those of you who really want to know is the fact that we have wage stagnation, which means that money is the amount of money you get is not going up. Meanwhile, the cost of living and everything else has gone up significantly. And then on top of that, the rich are getting a larger share of the money every single year, including in this last tax cut where the rich made billions of dollars off these tax cuts and regular folks probably made between $3 to $7 on average. And if we had more money coming into poor, and working class people, then we see a huge difference in the economy and in our paychecks.
And I just want to say quickly to my black brothers and sisters in particular, do not get caught up in the hype, because I've had conversations, particularly in the African American community, where they're like, oh, we don't want, Spanish people coming here. And they actually feed into that rhetoric. And you have to remember, Trump doesn't want, people from other countries who are black and brown coming either. I mean, Haitians in particular, we know that he is trying to remove their temporary protection status and send back Haitian refugees and people who needed asylum because the country has been in ruins for so many years. He's trying to get everybody up out of here. And, just a few months ago, I was in Haiti and I saw the devastation myself first-handedly. The country still needs a lot of infrastructure and it needs to be built up. And frankly, it's not as safe for certain people to go back and live. So I think we need to give them the choice. If you want to go back to Haiti, yes, go ahead, build up the country and contribute. But if not, we should not be kicking them out.
No, absolutely. And look, and the other reason why what this is really about is there was a breaking news update this week that Donald Trump wants to divert divert money away from Puerto Rico's relief fund and into the border wall. So like if it doesn't make it any clearer that he does not care about black and brown people and instead wants to put up a racist border wall. An even better piece of information about this is the number one reason that people are in this country illegally is not because they cross the southern border. It is because they come here on a visa and they overstay. And the majority of people who are coming here on a visa and overstaying are not black and Hispanic and are not coming from South American countries. I'm not going to tell you who they are because I think it's irrelevant. No, it's actually Asians. But now I told you who you are because I had to correct you. But,
I tricked her.
Like the fact is, I saw this great meme the other day, and I'm going to read it because this is what this really comes down to in some ways. It comes down to money. Rich people know that if they can convince poor and people of color to go against each other, that they get to keep all the wealth concentrated in their hands. And this is what it says. A banker, a worker, and an asylum seeker are sitting at a table with 20 cookies. The banker takes 19 cookies and warns the worker, watch out, the asylum seeker is going to take your cookie away.
Thank you, Alyssa, for telling us, just really putting that very concisely in a meme. We are wrapping it up. Stanley has a quick thing he wants to say or read. Go ahead.
Yeah, just when DeAndre asked how long can the government be shut down before some type of martial law, the government can be shut down for as long as
indefinitely.
Indefinitely. It doesn't. There's not really like a deadline on when it can reopen. As far as martial law, I'm not really sure how to answer that question. I'm not sure that's something that we can do, Alyssa.
I mean, martial law is essentially the idea that if there was a national emergency, like, for example, if we got nuked, that the government could institute what they call martial law, which is essentially suspending the Bill of Rights of the Constitution and doing things that the government would otherwise be able to do, not be able to do. So they're unrelated in some ways. Could a government shutdown that went on for so long lead to a situation where you had to institute martial law? Only in a situation where people got so desperate that they started looting and setting fires. And I mean, could it happen? Yeah, it could. But generally speaking, I would say the two things are unrelated.
Okay, so we do have to bring this conversation to a close. But before we say goodbye, we should talk about what we can and should be doing about this. I mean, Jackie, what are some actionable steps people can try to take to put our government back in order and to demand that it's reopened, as well as making sure that we stay aware of the humanitarian crisis at the border?
Yeah, I think that you shouldn't fall for false flags, as Alyssa really definitely laid out. I think that this is just wrong, right? This whole issue is factually incorrect. To think that this is, I don't know, like, don't fall for this rhetoric, right? It's racist, it's xenophobic, and it's a ploy to disenfranchise hundreds of thousands of people who are government workers, and people who are refugees, seeking refugee status, right? Seeking protection from violence in their own countries, to get this fascist statue built along 2,000 miles across the border, right? And so I would say don't fall for it. Call your elected officials and tell them that we do not want a wall. If you are impacted by this shutdown, if you are not receiving pay, you need to call your elected officials, your Congress members, your U.S. senators, and demand that they push to reopen the government, because this cannot continue.
Stanley, quickly, what steps should we all be taking?
So the most important thing you can be doing is calling your elected officials. Obviously, call Democrats and tell them to make sure that we fund this government, and tell them not to fund the wall. When if you live in a district where you have a Republican as your representative, and if you're not sure, you can literally just go to Google and type in who is my Senate representative or congressional representative, and it'll tell you based on your zip code. Call them, let them know that we don't want a wall. You have to fund our government. And I would also demand that they give every single worker who has not received pay back pay, including subcontracted workers like janitors and other folks like that.
Right.
Absolutely. Alyssa, 30 seconds, final words on what we can be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one, obviously, call your officials. Two, if you're conservative, if you're a Republican, if you voted for Trump, it's really important that you make your voice heard, that you contact your elected officials and say, look, I voted for him, but now that I look at how this prolonged fight is going to impact, not just me, but the safety of our country and our community, I realize that I was wrong and that we don't need this wall. Now, some people are never going to get there because they're racist, but there are a lot of Republicans that potentially have the ability to impact this, especially people, like I mentioned, like farmers that are really being affected by this. And of course, as I say at the end of every show, and I will show you my shirt, PHUCKING, vote in the next election. Make sure you vote. Elections have consequences. Your vote matters.
And I just want to end by saying this. a quote from Donald Trump when he was asked about how people are being impacted. He said, "I'm sure that people that are on the receiving end, meaning the government shutdown, will make adjustments. They always do." And in fact, he was actually questioned by someone saying, you used to be a landlord. If you, in real estate as a landlord, do you think that people who can't pay their rents on time because they're not getting a paycheck, should they get some relief? And he was like, yeah, I guess so. But the fact of the matter is, that's not the reality. That's not who Donald Trump is. He was literally kicking black and brown people out of the buildings that he owned here in New York a few decades ago. And that's just not a reality of something that we can expect. Like, he's putting this onus on us, the workers, the taxpayers, and then trying to basically tell us to figure it out. It's basically like, let them eat cake. And, at this point, to Alyssa's point, if you were someone who voted for Donald Trump, if you aren't waking up now, I don't know when you will get it. Donald Trump does not care about you. He does not care about the fact that you can't buy groceries, that you're not paying your rent, and that you can't even pay off your creditors. He doesn't care about how this is affecting your credit score. He said it. He keeps saying it. So he's basically like, figure it out. So he's putting it on us. And in return, we need to make sure that we take our passion, we take whatever we're feeling to the polls and vote. On that note, we do have to say goodbye. But I want to thank everyone who hung out with us today. Thank you so much for all the comments we received via Facebook Live. And of course, if you want to continue to support Let Your Voice Be Heard, please do so on our Patreon account. That's Patreon/Be Heard Radio. If you leave a donation or make a donation and support the causes, if you support us, then we'll support the causes that are affecting you.